April, Easter Day. Melchione Baldi, meaning to do me a favor, has instead made me feel extremely embarrassed and ashamed. I'd originally asked him to have the statue delivered to my host and hostess late on Sunday afternoon, hoping they'd receive this token of my gratitude when I'd already left their house after sharing their Easter meal at midday. But when Baldi doubted if he could find men prepared to work on a holiday, I decided it would be perfectly all right if the present arrived the next day. It might even be better. Courtesies should not be too rushed. But Baldi didn't want to disappoint me, so he managed to find 4 young porters, and they came and knocked at Gregorio's door while we were still in the middle of the meal. Everyone got up from the table and started rushing to and fro, and there was such a hullabaloo. I didn't know where to hide my face, especially when the young men, all inexperienced and perhaps slightly tipsy, overturned a stone bench in the garden and broke it in two, and started trampling over the flower beds like a pack of wild boars. I can't describe how I felt. Gregorio went purple with stifled fury, his wife made sarcastic remarks, and their daughters laughed. What was intended as an elegant gesture had been turned into a crude farce. And that wasn't the first of the day's surprises. Towards noon, when I arrived at the Mangiavaca house, perhaps for the last time, Gregorio welcomed me at the door like a brother and took me into his study to chat until his wife and daughters were ready. He asked if I'd made up my mind about leaving, and I told him I still meant to sail sometime during the next few days, probably for Giblet, though I still was uncertain about my destination. He told me again how much my departure would grieve him, that I'd always be welcome in his house, and that if in spite of everything I decided to stay in Genoa, he would see that I never regretted it. Then he asked if I'd given up the idea of going to London. Not yet, I told him, but although I was still attracted by the 100th name, it would probably be wisest to return to the East to take my too long neglected business in hand again, and to make sure my sister was safely reunited with her children. Gregorio, who seemed to be listening with only half an ear, started singing the praises of the cities I'd go through if I went by sea to England. Nice, Marseille, Agde, Barcelona, Valencia, and above all, Lisbon. Then he asked, his hand lying heavy on my shoulder, "Could you do something for me if you change your mind?" I said truthfully that nothing would give me greater pleasure than to repay a little of my moral debt for all he'd done for me. He explained the effects of the war between England and Holland had recently rather interfered with his business, and he needed to get an important message to his agent in Lisbon, a certain Cristoforo Gabbiano. Then he took from a drawer a letter already written and closed with his own seal. "Take this," he said, "and take good care of it. If you decide to go to London by sea, you'll have to go through Lisbon. In that case, I'd be eternally grateful if you'd deliver this letter to Gabbiano himself. You'd be doing me a great favor. On the other hand, if you should decide to go somewhere else and can't manage to give the letter back to me, promise me you'll burn it unopened and unread." I promised. It was another, and this time quite pleasant surprise when, just before we sat down to table, Gregorio asked his eldest daughter to show me round the garden. The few minutes that followed confirmed my excellent impressions of the girl. She was still smiling, had a very graceful walk, and knew the names of all the flowers. As I listened, I thought to myself that if my life had turned out differently and I hadn't met Marta, if I didn't have a house, a business, and a sister over the sea, I might have been happy with Gregorio's daughter. But it's too late for that, and I hope she'll be happy without me. I am not sure whether I should end this list of the pointless incidents of my Easter day by noting that my friend's wife, the virtuous Dame Orientina, welcomed me this afternoon with a smile and some other indications of pleasure. I suppose it's because she knows I'm leaving, never to return. Monday, 26 April 1666. I was sitting in my room gazing out of the window when suddenly the door burst open. I turned round to see a very youthful sailor standing breathless in the doorway, his hand still on the latch. Did I want to go to London? He asked. I was so struck by what seemed like a call of fate that I immediately said yes. He then told me to make haste because the ship would soon be setting sail. I hurriedly tied up my few things into a couple of bundles which stuck out like the angel's wings when he picked them up and stowed one under each arm. His long fair hair was tucked roughly into a woolen cap. I followed him down the stairs and across the hallway, stopping just long enough to say a brief farewell to the innkeeper's wife and throw down a handful of coins. Then we ran through the narrow streets to the quay, where I hurled up the gangway with my tongue hanging out. "So here you are at last," said the captain. "We are going to leave without you." I was too breathless to ask any questions. All I could do was stare in astonishment, but no one noticed. I am writing this aboard the Sanctus Dionysius. Yes, I am already at sea. I arrived in Genoa unexpectedly, and a month later I am leaving there in much the same way. I was still weighing up the pros and cons of, on the one hand, going straight back to Gibelet, and on the other hand, making a detour to Smyrna or Chios or somewhere else first, when all the time Providence, unbeknown to me, had chosen my path for me. Sitting slumped on a crate to get my breath back, I kept asking myself whether it was really me who was expected on board. Mightn't the young sailor have been sent to the Maltese Cross to fetch some other traveler? I stood up and looked down along the quay, expecting to see someone running towards the ship, shouting and waving his arms. But there was no one there but tired porters, unoccupied customs men, clerks, holiday makers out for a walk in their best clothes, and ordinary citizens come to watch the comings and goings in the harbor. Among the latter I recognized a familiar face. It was Melchion Baldi, whom I'd cursed so heartily yesterday at Gregorio's. He was leaning against a wall and waving to catch my eye. His face glowed with sweat and satisfaction. He told me he spent all his Sundays, holidays, and other idle hours in the harbor watching the ships arrive and depart and getting the sailors to talk to him. He was a dreamer as well as a merchant, a stealer, or rather a receiver of voyages. After the embarrassment he'd caused me yesterday, I felt more like reproaching than smiling at him, and I almost averted my eyes. But I was about to leave Genoa forever, and it would have been unkind to snub him. He'd only been trying to please me, and must still think the statue was delivered safely as when I'd wished, and that I was grateful to him. So I forgot my resentment and waved back at him in as pleased and friendly a manner as if I'd just caught sight of him. Whereupon he jumped up and down excitedly, clearly delighted with our final encounter. I too, have often reproached myself for this sort of thing, welcomed the silent reconciliation with relief. And slowly the ship began to move away from the quay. Baldy was still waving a white handkerchief at me, and from time to time I waved my hand back at him. At the same time, I looked around me, still trying to understand how on earth I came to be here. I felt and still feel neither glad nor sorry about it, simply intrigued. Perhaps it would be wise to end this page with words like, "His will be done." It will be, anyway. At sea, 27 April. Yesterday I mentioned Providence because I know that's what poets and famous travelers do. But I am not fooled. No doubt all of us, strong or weak, wily or naive, are the blind instruments of Providence. But Providence has nothing to do with this voyage. I know perfectly well what hand has traced my route and led me to the sea, to the west, to London. At the time, in the surprise, and the general hubbub of departure, I didn't understand. But this morning I see it all. When I say all, I am only exaggerating a little. I know who impelled me in this direction. I can guess the means by which Gregorio maneuvered me into accepting the idea of going to England, but I still can't make out all his calculations. I suppose he's trying to get me to marry his daughter and wanted to prevent me from returning to Gibelet because I'd probably never come back again. This voyage of a few months to the other side of the world probably makes him feel he's still got some hold on me. But I don't blame Gregorio or anyone else. No one forced me to go. I could just have said no to the fair haired messenger and I'd still be in Genoa or else on my way back east. But I ran to catch this ship. If Gregorio is guilty, then I am one of his accomplices, along with Providence, the year of the beast, and the 100th name. At sea, 28 April. Yesterday evening, after I'd written those few lines expressing resignation, I saw the fair young sailor going along the deck, the boy they sent to fetch me from the inn. I signed to him to come over to me. I wanted to ask him a few urgent questions, but there was such a childlike look of fear in his eyes I just slipped a silver gross into his hand and didn't say anything. The sea has been calm ever since we set sail, but I've been ill all the same. It is as if we're it is as if it were vexation rather than the waves that upsets me when I am on board a ship. Now, for instance, neither my head nor my stomach is churning, but I daren't go on writing much longer. The smell of ink, which usually I am not even aware of, makes me feel ill. I'd better stop straight away. 3 May. It's Monday, and this morning, when for the first time in a week I was able to take a turn round the deck, the ship's surgeon came and asked me if it was true that I was Master Gregorio Mangivaca's future son-in-law. Amused by this inaccurate and, to say the least, premature description, I said I was one of the gentleman's friends, but no relation. How, I asked the surgeon, had he learned that we knew each other? He suddenly looked embarrassed as if he wished he hadn't spoken, and then hurried away, saying the captain had sent for him. The incident made me think people were talking about me behind my back. Perhaps they make fun of me when they gather together for meals. I ought to be angry, but I think, what does it matter? Let them laugh. It doesn't cost anything to mock the worthy, portly Baltazare Embriaco, dealer in curios, whereas they might be flogged for making fun of the captain, though God knows he probably deserves it, and worse. Judge for yourself. Instead of taking the usual route and calling in either at Nice or Marseille, or both, he's decided to make straight for Valencia in Spain, on the pretext that the northeast wind will get us there in 5 days. But the wind keeps changing. After carrying us as far as the open sea, it blew itself out, and since then it has changed direction every night, with the result that on the 8th day of the voyage we're still nowhere. We can't see either the Spanish or the French coast, nor even Corsica or Sardinia or the Balearics. Where are we? Who knows? The captain says he does, and no one dares to contradict him. We shall see. Some of the passengers have run out of food, and most have almost no water left. We haven't reached the disaster yet, but we are heading towards it with all sails spread. May. On the Sanctus Dionysius, whenever two people whisper together, they're talking about the captain. Some roll their eyes up to heaven, others now dare to laugh. But how long can we go on just laughing and whispering at his rashness? I am quite well again. I walk about, have a hearty appetite, talk to all and sundry, and look down on those of my fellow passengers that are still seasick. I didn't make any arrangements beforehand about meals, apart from expecting to buy what food might be available on the ship. I am sorry I didn't engage a cook or bring some provisions on board with me. But it all happened so fast. Most of all, I wish I still had Hatem with me. I only hope nothing has happened to him and that he's safe and sound in Giblet, where incidentally I ought to have gone myself. That's what I think now, though I didn't start doing so until I'd set out in the opposite direction. Ah, well, there it is. I shrug my shoulders. I don't complain. I defy the sea by humming a Genoese song. I record in my notebook the various decrees of fate interspersed with my own passionate shilly-shallyings. Yes, there it is. I am resigned to my fate. Everything ends underground, so what does it matter how it gets there? Why should I take shortcuts rather than detours? 6 May. A good captain turns the Atlantic into the Mediterranean. A bad captain turns the Mediterranean into the Atlantic. That's what one of the passengers, a Venetian, had the audacity to say aloud today. He didn't say it to me, but to all the people gathered near the ship's rail. I didn't answer him, but I memorized what he'd said, intending to write it down here. It's true that we all feel as if we were lost in the midst of a vast ocean and long for the moment when someone shouts, "Land!" And yet we are in the most familiar waters and at the best time of the year. The last rumor has it that we should berth tomorrow evening in either Barcelona or Valencia. We are so disoriented that if we'd been told it'll be Marseille or Aigues Mortes or Mahon or Algiers, we'd have believed it. Somewhere in the Mediterranean, 7 May 1666. Today I exchanged a few sentences with the captain. He's 40 years old and his name is Centurion, and quite literally, he's mad. I don't mean he's bold or reckless or capricious or eccentric. I mean he's crazy. He believes he's being pursued by winged demons and thinks he can escape them by following winding routes. If another passenger had talked to me like that, or a sailor, or the surgeon, or the carpenter, I'd have gone straight to the captain so that he could clap him in irons and put him ashore at our next port of call. But what are you to do if it's the captain himself who's crazy? It was obviously insane. If he was obviously insane, raving, shrieking, and foaming at the mouth, we'd have got together and overpowered him, and we'd have notified the authorities in the port where we called next. But it's not like that at all. Whatever we have here is quite a madman who walks about in a fitting manner, talks, jokes, and gives orders as to the manner born. Until today, I'd practically never spoken to him, just a couple of words that last day in Genoa when I rushed up and he told me the ship had nearly left without me. But this morning when he was strolling round the deck, he passed quite close to me. I greeted him politely and he replied conventionally. As this is the custom in Genoa, in respectable society, we spoke first about our families, and he courteously referred to the Embriachi's renown and the history of the city. I was beginning to think the satirical comments about him were unfair, when a bird swooped low over our heads, its cry making us both look up. I noticed that the captain was looking uneasy. "What kind of bird is it?" I asked. "A common gull? A herring gull? An albatross?" "It's a demon," he replied with some agitation. At first I thought this was just a way of objecting to the nuisance birds can cause. Then I wondered whether it wasn't a seaman's name for a particular species. Meanwhile the captain went on, becoming more and more disturbed. "They're after me. Wherever I go they find me. They'll never leave me in peace." One flap of the creature's wings had been enough to set him off. "They've been after me for years, everywhere I go." He wasn't talking to me any longer. He was just taking me to witness his incomprehensible conversation with himself or his demons. After a few moments he left me, muttering that he was going to give orders for us to change course to throw off our pursuers. Good God, where is he taking us? I've decided not to tell anyone about this, at least for the time being. Anyhow, Who would I confide in, and what should I say? And with what object? Did I want to stir up mutiny, fill the ship with fear, suspicion, and revolt, and be responsible for the bloodshed that might ensue? Too dangerous. Keeping quiet might not be the most courageous solution, but I really think the best thing to do is just watch and wait and be on the alert. It's a good thing I can tell this journal what I can't tell anyone else. 8 May. This morning I had a conversation with my Venetian fellow passenger, Girolamo Durazzi. Our talk was brief but courteous. If my late lamented father could read these lines, I'd have said, courteous but brief. Another passenger is a Persian whom the crew refer to under their breath as the prince. I don't know if he really is a prince, but he carries himself like one, and two sturdy fellows follow him closely everywhere, looking around in all directions as if they feared for his life. He has a short beard and wears a turban that's so narrow it looks almost like a band of black silk. He never speaks to anyone, even his two guards. He just looks straight in front of him as he walks along, stopping now and then to gaze at the horizon or to the sky. Sunday, 9 May 1666. We've dropped anchor at last. Not in Barcelona or Valencia, though. We're at the island of Minorca in the Balearics, more precisely in the port of Mahon. Rereading my last few passages, I see it's one of the many places rumored to be our destination, rather as if the name were written on the face of the dice thrown for us by Providence. Instead of trying to find a last vestige of sanity in the heart of madness, why don't I leave this crazy ship? In other words, let them all go to perdition without me. The captain, the surgeon, the Venetian, the Persian prince, and all. But I shan't go. I shan't run away. Do I still care what happens to these strangers? Or is it that I no longer care about my own survival? Am I acting out of supreme courage or supreme resignation? I don't know, but I'm staying. At the last moment, seeing how many people were flocking round the boats, I even decided not to go ashore, but to call the young sailor with the fair hair and get him to buy some things for me. His name is Maurizio, and he feels he owes me something because of the trick he played on me. To tell the truth, I don't hold it against him at all. I find the sight of his yellow locks rather a comfort, but it's better he shouldn't know that. I wrote him a list of things I need, but I could see from his embarrassment that he'd never been taught to read, so I made him memorize the shopping list and gave him more than enough money to cover the cost. When he got back, I let him keep the change, and he seemed overjoyed. I expect he'll come and ask me every day if there's anything he can do for me. He can't take Hatim's place, but like him, he looks bright and honest, and what more can one ask of an employee? One day I shall get Mauricio to tell me who it was that sent him to find me at the Maltese Cross. But is there any point? I know exactly what he'll say. Yes, on reflection, there is a point. I want to hear with my own ears that Gregorio Mangiavaca paid him to come to fetch me that day and make me run to catch the ship now carrying me to England. To England, or God knows where. But I'm not in a hurry. We'll both still be on this ship for weeks, and if I'm patient and ingenious, the lad will tell me all in the end. 11 May. Well, I'd never have thought I'd be friends with a Venetian. It's true that when two merchants meet on a long sea voyage, they're bound to get into conversation. But it went beyond that. We found we had so many interests in common that I soon forgot all the prejudices instilled in me by my father. No doubt it helped that Durazzi, though born in Venice, had lived since he was a child in various places in the East. In Candia to begin with, then in Tsaritsyn on the river Volga. He recently settled in Moscow itself, where he seems to enjoy a distinguished reputation. He lives in the foreign quarter, which he tells me is becoming a city within a city. It contains French caterers, Viennese pastry cooks, Italian and Polish painters, Danish and Scottish soldiers, and of course, dealers and adventurers from all over the place. Some of them have even set up a pitch outside the city where they play a sort of English game that involves kicking a ball. The Earl of Carlisle, King Charles's ambassador, sometimes goes to watch. 12th May. My Venetian friend asked me to sup with him in his quarters yesterday. I still hesitate and feel embarrassed when I call him that. I suppose one day I'll get used to it. He's brought a cook with him, as well as a valet and one other servant. I ought to have done the same, instead of coming on board alone like a vagabond or an exile. In the course of the meal, my friend told me why he's going to London. His object is to recruit some English artisans to go and ply their trades in Moscow. He hasn't actually been commissioned to do so by the Tsar Alexis, but he travels with the Russian ruler's approval and under his protection. Any skilled craftsmen will be welcome, whatever their specialty, on condition that they don't try to convert anyone to their own religion. The Tsar is a sensible man and doesn't want Moscow to become a den of fanatical Christian Republicans. It's said that England is full of them, but since the return of King Charles 6 years ago, many of them have gone into hiding or exile. Girolamo tried to persuade me to go and live in Moscow. He treated me to another pleasing description of life in the foreign quarter there. Out of politeness and to encourage him to go on, I said, "Perhaps. But I am not tempted. I am 40 now and too old to start a new life in a country where I know neither the language nor the customs. I have two homelands already, Genoa and Giblet, and if I had to leave one, it would be to go to the other. Moreover, I am used to being able to see the sea, and I'd miss it if I'd had to be away. Admittedly, I don't feel comfortable aboard a ship. I prefer to have both feet on dry land, but it has to be near the sea. I need to smell the ozone. I need to hear the waves dying and being reborn and dying again. I need to be able to lose myself gazing at its vastness. Some people might be able to make do with the vastness of the desert or of snow-covered plains, but not someone born where I was born, and not with Genoese blood in his veins." That said, I can easily understand people who leave their home and their loved ones and even change their names to go and start a new life in another country without any boundaries. And not only my ancestors, the Americas or Russia, didn't my ancestors do the same thing? And not only my ancestors, but everyone's ancestors. All the towns in the world and all the villages too were founded and populated by people from elsewhere. The whole earth has been filled by migration after migration. If I were still light-hearted and fleet of foot, I might let myself be drawn away from my native Mediterranean and go live in that foreign quarter whose very name I find tempting. 13 May. Is it true that the King of France intends to invade the lands of the Ottoman Sultan and has even ordered his ministers to draw a detailed plan of attack? Girolamo says so, and backs up his assertion with various pieces of evidence that I have no reason to doubt. He even maintains that the French king has sounded the Sophie of Persia about the possibility that the latter, a great enemy of the Sultan, might at any given moment stir up trouble and lure the Turkish armies to Georgia, Armenia, and Atropine. Meanwhile, with the help of the Venetians, King Louis would seize Candia, the Aegean Islands, the Bosphorus Straits, and perhaps even the Holy Land. Although this doesn't strike me as at all possible, I am surprised that my Venetian should speak of it so openly to someone he's only just met. He's certainly rather talkative, but I can hardly blame him when I learn so much from him, and when his indiscretion is due solely to our friendship and the fact that he trusts me. I spent all night mulling over the King of France's plans, and I can't say I like the sound of them. Of course, if things went his way and he could get a lasting grip on the islands, the Straits, and the Levant as a whole, I wouldn't complain. But if he and the Venetians embarked on some rash enterprise that came to nothing, the vengeance of the Sultan would fall on me and my colleagues. Yes, on all the European merchants living and working in the ports of the Levant. The more I think about it, the more I am convinced that such a war would from the very outset be a disaster for me and mine. Heaven grant that it never happens. I have just reread the last few lines and those before them, and I suddenly wonder if it isn't dangerous to write such things and express such wishes. Naturally, I set everything down in my usual gibberish, which nobody but myself can decipher. But that applies only to personal matters, which I want to conceal from my family and possible snoopers. But if the authorities were ever to take an interest in my papers, if some Ottoman official, some wali or pasha or qadi, were to take it into his head to look into them, and threaten me with impalement or torture to make me hand over the key to the code, how could I hold out? I'd reveal the secret, and then they'd see that I'd be pleased to see the King of France lay hold of the Levant. Perhaps I should tear this page up and throw it away when I go back east, and even avoid mentioning such things in future. I am probably being overcautious. No wali or pasha is really going to come and pry among my notes. But for anyone in my position whose family has lived abroad for generations and who's at the mercy of every kind of snub and denunciation, prudence is not just an attitude, it's absolutely essential to survival.